Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Matters, Informing Leaders and Inspiring Solutions with the People's Doctors. I'm Dr. Loretta Howard, and I'll be your lead host today. And as always, I'm delighted to have with me my co-host, Dr. Cheryl White and Dr. Andre Howard.
All
Hello,
right. Hello.
hello,
Hello.
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 So today we're continuing our discussion on emotional intelligence, and joining us is a very special guest into this conversation, Mr. Kevin Walsh. Hi, Kevin.
How you doing? Glad to be
All
here.
right. Yes. Kevin actually retired from a 43-year career in child welfare, mental health, and the juvenile justice system in New York State. However, he has remained very active after his retirement because he continues to serve as a consultant for the New York State Juvenile Justice Reform Initiative. He's a mentor for leaders at the Social Current Executive Leadership Institute, and Kevin serves as an ambassador for Family Heart Foundation. He also serves on the Patient and Caregiver Advisory Board as a mentor, and he is a legislative advocate for zero prostate cancer. So with all that going on, it does not sound like you have really retired, Kevin. Not yet.
I've been very active, fortunately.
Yes, you are. So as usual, we are going to start off with our first audience question. We have two. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you to also answer it after Dr. Cheryl and Dr. Dre. So our first question today: how can nonprofit leaders who are constantly juggling limited resources and high stakes decisions make time for the inner work of self-awareness? And we'll start with you, Dr. Cheryl.
Mm. As always, these are really good questions from our audience.
Yes.
And, one of the things that I say to my team all the time, if it's not on the calendar, it won't happen.
Right.
So I'm gonna stick with that. I think it's putting it on the calendar and being intentional about helping to make it happen. But colleagues, what you might have a more insightful
Mhm.
answer.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think Dr. White definitely gave a good entree to that. And again, another excellent question. I don't know. I keep going back to this whole thing about emotional intelligence that I don't know if you make, I don't know, because it's like the inner work. So I don't know if you make time for it, right? I think you just have to be intentional when you do the work itself, right? I think you just have to be conscious and aware. Okay, here's where I need to apply my emotional intelligence. I think, taking time certainly to, read books, articles, briefing yourself in terms of how to be sharp, how to become more self-aware, I think is all a plus. But I think the real work in terms of a leader really weaving in this inner work and around self-awareness is really, it's a natural process. And I think, you just have to be conscious as you do the work, as you lead others, thinking about the questions you may ask, thinking about, the reflections you may take in terms of leading a team, maybe even taking some reflection time afterward of a meeting you've gone through to kind of see, well, what did I do? What could I have done better? What can I improve upon? So, I think, a lot of this is really some of that natural work that just takes place as you go through the process and you apply some of the emotional intelligence components as part of that work.
Right, great. Thank you. Kevin, how would you respond to that?
Well, it possibly a little bit of both of the first answers from Cheryl and Andre. I think when people recognize that development self-awareness, it's not just a nice idea. It has very strategic value in your as a leader. It's an important thing to us incorporate, right? And just like I use the metaphor, I guess, just like when you plan a budget ends up being a value statement. Where you put your resources, that demonstrates your value. And I'll go back to what Cheryl said. Your calendar is a value statement.
Mhm.
What shows up in your calendar is what you value. And I think that people should recognize that given that it's a strategic value, they need to set the time aside to do this. I don't believe it happens intuitively. Andre was right. There are those reflective moments, those things happen. Without intention and structure and editing it to your day or sometime in there, it won't happen consistently enough where you learn to it, because you do have to learn to operate utilizing all the strategies of emotional intelligence over a period of time until it becomes kind of your second nature. So no, I'm into the put it on the calendar.
Thank you so much. I agree with everything you said. And when Dr. Sherrill said that about the calendar, I was really feeling that because I like to organize things like that after I've had some meetings or different decisions. I do like to have that debrief time for myself to journal, literally. What worked? What didn't work? Were there any triggers? What could have been done differently? What did I learn from that actual interaction? But I do like to put that time, block that time out on the calendar because I know I need it, because we can get so busy sometimes. And if you don't do it, then you might forget some things and you never get to go back and reflect. So I'm all about that calendar planning. Yes, I am. Okay. All right. So with that, Kevin, we're gonna start asking you a few questions for our listening audience. So, Kevin, when you first stepped into a leadership role, what did you think leadership was supposed to look like, and how did the picture change, or did it stay the same?
Oh no, the picture definitely changed. I think, you know, and you heard that it was a 43-year long career that ended 10 years ago. So we're going back a half a century at this point. But I do remember that when I first began to work, the leader, it was more of a kind of a military, a command and control kind of philosophy. You know, it was a hierarchical kind of structure with authority sitting at the top of the position. And your job was to make sure that the people who were working with you, you know, they had their roles and responsibilities probably outlined in their job description. They knew their task. Your job was to kind of hold them to task and make sure they accomplished everything. They carried all those roles and responsibilities out. So there was a little bit of a top-down kind of it was not a little bit, it was a top-down kind of a structure. That kind of structure, though, quite frankly, we learned doesn't work if the program you're operating in or the project you're trying to accomplish is completely separated from the total context of the environment you're operating in. In other words, you don't have to worry about outside influences. Well, clearly that has changed dramatically over the last number of years. I mean, we operate in a never-ending context and environment, you know, whether it's funding issues, political pressures, managers and directors are having to deal with different generations of workers who have different attitudes and different ways of approaching work. So with all that change, you had to learn you could no longer command and control. Whether you liked it or not, you had to change. And you had to learn how to relate in that context. And as they say, I think the terminology now here is a lot of transformational kind of leadership where you're trying to motivate people more, having them express and participate in discussions with you more, and collectively learn and work together. So that's a huge shift and change in it, you know. I think now when we talk about the use, well, I will get on another time, but emotional management, you know, when I first working, we didn't have that terminology. You know, I mean, it's really what we were learning by bits and pieces, but we didn't understand it. So back to the question, I think that the biggest dramatic change is from the hierarchical top-down kind of structure to a more collegial, transformational kind of approach.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So, Kevin, wondering, was there a moment, a conversation, a conflict, a decision you made where you realized what you were feeling on the inside was directly affecting what was happening on the outside?
Well, yeah, I think it was a conversation I had with somebody, not so much my conversation, but a conversation I had with somebody. This happened a long time ago, and I never forgot it, to be honest with you. It was my supervisor. He was the executive director, and I was part of his team. And you know, I'd go to him for supervision and discussions. And I remember once him bringing me into his office and just talking to me, and he valued me. I was a really nice, supportive person, and he valued me. It was almost paternalistic thing because I was young. But what I remember most was him saying to me one day, when we're working together, you have a lot of smart things to say. You help solve problems. But he goes, your problem is the way you say it, people don't pay attention to you. And it's like, whoa, it was like, my Harold, whoa, that was a little more feedback than I wanted. But the truth of the matter was he was right. I always approached things as I almost like I was thinking I had to win an argument rather than kind to discuss things with people and come to some agreement. So that conversation opened my eyes. Really well. Obviously, that conversation was probably 40 years ago, and I never forgot that as long as I lived. And I think that I do think about it all the time. So it was a step forward for me for learning things.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, I, as I hear you say that, I think the beauty in hearing that is when we talk about emotional intelligence very often comes from self-awareness, and self-awareness very often gets increased when we are open to hearing feedback from others. So it sounds like you heard that feedback and it stayed with you, and you have made adjustments throughout your career, your life. So kudos to you for your openness and how that, I'm sure, has allowed you to grow and will allow each of us to grow when we're open to hearing feedback from others. Thanks, Kevin. Were you going to say something else?
no. I mean, there was other examples. I had another one where
Mhm.
I applied for when I was trying to move up the leadership ladder, and I applied for a position at the agency, and I didn't get it, and they brought somebody in from the outside. So I was smarting a little bit over that. I didn't think it was right. However, I realized, that was their decision, and I had to relate to my new boss in the position I thought I was going to have uh, to continue working for them. And I really tried to believe I was doing it well. I honestly thought, all right, I can put that out of my side, out of side. It is what it is, and I got to move on. And the person only lasted a year. But when I was talking to them towards the end of the year, they acknowledged she felt some tension too, and she realized why. But she also said to me, and this stuck with me too, just like she said, Kevin, I never thought you were paying attention to me. And I was shocked. That was another. It was like, because I thought, wow, I worked hard. I thought I sucked up and became a team player and listened to her. And I did. She said, I learned over time you really were. But you would come into my office and you wouldn't make any eye contact with me half the time. I would talk in a way that it was almost not probably as responsive or as I should have been. And then I realized I wasn't doing a very good job of that stuff, that I was still annoyed about not getting the job. I had worked it out, and it was unfair to that person.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't do anything to prevent me from getting the job. She just won out, and that was the
Yeah.
reality of it. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Hurt. I wanted it, but when she said that to me, I thought, my God, here I am thinking I'm really doing okay with all this, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I find myself in the kind of similar thing, I kind of check a little bit, like, you sure I'm not holding on to a little too much here that's affecting what I'm doing. So it's
Yeah.
and it's an operating principle you got to work with.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. We're actually coming up on a break, but when we return, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Dre to ask another question similar to that, to find out about what more wonderful stories you probably have to share with us. So with that said, we're going to take a short break. And when we return, on our discussion with emotional intelligence with Kevin Walsh. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back with more on leadership matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. All right, we are back with more Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. For those of you just joining us, I'm your host today, Dr. Loretta Howard, with my wonderful co-host, Dr. Cheryl White and Dr. Andre Howard, and our very special guest, Mr. Kevin Walsh. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Dre, for continuing the conversation.
Yeah, I love the story Kevin was sharing with us prior to the break. I mean, it really push you to think about, what is this emotional intelligence and why is it so important? So on that line, no one really handed you a manual on emotional intelligence, Kevin. So how did you even begin to understand that this was something you needed to work on?
Well, yes, I mean, without belaboring the fact, again, no manual existed for that. It wasn't that they didn't just hand it to me. But no, I think you begin to learn. I knew as I kept on working and moving up in the leadership role, I was experiencing all sorts of things where I felt uncertain. I was tentative about this, and I was second guessing myself. I felt myself so many times feeling vulnerable, and am I in over my head? All the things that creates that kind of anxiety with you. And then I started realizing colleagues shared it too. That I wasn't alone in that.
Right.
But I needed to figure out literally how to understand it, what I was going through. I knew I could have all these individual experiences and I could understand them individually, but collectively I had to make sense out of all this and how to deal with it all, right? It wasn't just solving one isolated part, right? And then quite honestly, then it began more than just doing my own research and reading and trying to go to trainings to learn about this. When I heard about, the emotional intelligence became a concept that what people were discussing. And when I heard about it and learned about the thing, it resonated with me, and I could see the value in it. So then it was just what began was just a journey of discovering the value of it and learning to use it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, there was no one had a manual. No one gave you a prescriptive way to going through that. You had to go out and learn it on your own.
Right.
So there was a little bit of expediency
Right.
on the learning curve for me.
Absolutely. But you obviously have done very well over your career, so I appreciate that. So great, excellent. Dr. Cheryl, let me throw this next question to you. You have to unmute yourself, Dr. White.
All righty there. So thanks, Dr. Dre. And kind of continuing in that space and having you reflect a little bit, Kevin, was there one emotion, or I should say maybe what is one emotion that you had to learn to manage as a leader? And we'll say manage, not eliminate. We think that emotions are important and they're signals. And so we don't want to eliminate them, but we do want to be able to manage them. So was there one that maybe was quietly doing damage before you were able to name it and manage it?
Well, I would think it was a level of walking around lots of times with a level of anxiety and fear of failure and feeling vulnerable, going back a while, like I was the boss. I was supposed to have the answers, right? And Kevin didn't have the answers. Kevin didn't have all the answers. But I was in the role of trying to figure things out and do it. So, that was very stressful at times.
So it's almost sounded like there was some fear in there, and that the emotion of fear was creating the anxiety, the fear that you didn't have the answer.
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh no, you feel very vulnerable and anxious about it. Nobody, until you get a better sense of yourself, everyone fears failure, and so it was coming to terms. I don't know if the right word is coming to terms with that, but trying to understand what was causing in me and how to deal with it. That was what I tried.
Yeah. And so I'll go on a limb and say it sounds like once you right size your expectation of yourself, like, okay, I'm not going to have all the answers, and that's okay. That helps reduce the anxiety because it put the fear aside. You could trust that you would know what you needed to know and not have fear about needing to know everything. You kind of right size your expectations, and that seemed to reduce the anxiety. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, no, very accurate. I would say, because I think when you recognize you're a leader, but you simply can't have all the answers for everything, and that's not a weakness. The smart leaders understand that.
Yeah.
All right, and they
Yeah.
realize,
Mhm.
so you can't you have to learn to accept that sense of vulnerability.
Mhm.
It's part of what you do, and then you have to realize that that vulnerability isn't your shortcoming. It's not because you failed at doing something. I call it that you have a knowledge gap on what you got to get done. And so you look at it this way: it's not, I'm not failing anything. I'm not doing anything right now. But I don't see it as failing. I just don't know enough yet. And my role
Mhm.
is to
Mhm.
learn, you know,
Yes.
and that's what you have to do to keep moving forward. That's a natural process.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
that you don't go out to learn something by default because you failed. You go out to learn
Mhm.
something, proving and getting better and moving forward.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that
I just want to name one other skill or a thought that comes up when I heard you say in your response there is your self-talk changed, right? Like what you were telling yourself about it changed also, and that seemed to help you manage the situations. Mhm.
absolutely, yeah. I never.
Mhm.
I don't even think of it as self-talk, but it
Mhm.
actually is a lot of self-talk.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
quite honestly, I do that a lot, all the time. I can be mumble.
Kevin,
Sometimes,
having served on the board with you, I think I know I've seen you do that.
actually, I think sometimes I think I'm self-talking, and my wife's in the other room, and she goes, "Who are you talking to in there, Kevin?"
Yeah.
You know, so it's so no, but it is something that you do because you have to think things through, and that's the
Mhm.
process, I think, of,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
But
through
I
it.
think as a leader, though, Kevin, I mean, to kind of pick up on this conversation, I think it's okay as a leader to pretend you have all of the answers. But inside you, you're saying to yourself, "Well, I really don't have all the answers." So maybe to exercise my emotional intelligence, I'll act as though I have all the answers, and maybe I'll tell those who report to me, "But what's your answer?" First before I tell you my answer. I mean, isn't that emotional intelligence to some degree, Kevin? That you, well, I mean, I
You
mean,
don't have to agree with that, Kevin.
I got a feeling I'm not going to agree with that, but I'm trying to
okay.
listen there. No, I think that, I think you're going, that underneath that is that you think you needed to have all the answers and you can't. You have to honestly accept that.
Yeah,
And I'm saying, like I said before, that's a strength in people,
yeah,
because then you're making it clear you're not coming from a negative point of view. You just have an answer. You're going to move forward positively and do something constructive about
yeah.
this. Because listen, the reality of it is I mean, this is not an insightful statement. We simply can't have the answers to everything we're dealing with. Especially nowadays, there's so much information, there's so many things changing. This is always a process of never-ending learning.
That's true.
And you have to recognize that, and you have to communicate that with this as a leader to your team. We're in a
That's it.
process of never-ending learning.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's so true, Kevin. So I appreciate you I'm trying to push you off your balance here. So I thank you for responding and thank you for the help, Dr. Cheryl, as well. So Kevin, I know we're getting to a break pretty soon again here, but as we think about self-awareness as this foundation of emotional intelligence, what really helped you get honest with yourself about your blind spots? Was it a mentor? Was it a hard conversation? Was it a failure? Is there something that comes to mind that really pushed you to think about, let me get honest that I do have blind spots, that, I don't know everything. I mean, was there a moment in time that you can go back and reflect upon that took place?
Yeah, well, yeah, there was several. I mean, I think there was several times. I mean, I kind of alluded to one with that conversation with my director when he told me it's the way I talk,
Right.
the way I present thing in an argument. That was like an aha moment.
Yeah.
But I also had another experience, what was a more direct conversation about how I was coming across,
Mm.
and it was really very interesting. When it was actually something related to my Eli project. When I had I paid to have a consultant come to the program I was working on,
Mm.
and it was a program of dealing with sexually reactive, sexually offending teenagers who were in the mental health and foster care system, and a lot of them didn't have home placement, so we had to transition them to the community, which is it's a hard population to deal
Right.
with. But we had a program, so I brought a consultant in to talked to all the staff, observed the thing. He literally stayed with us for 3 days, 4 days to do this. Well, anyway, at the end, he said he was going to come out with a report, and I thought, this is good. We're going to listen to the stuff. We want positive and negative feedback. Mm-hmm. He came to my office, and he said, Kevin, I also wrote an evaluation about you.
Okay, wow.
I went, oh. And he goes, would you like me to share it with you? Right? But actually, I think I'm laughing. I say, I still say,
you did say no, right? You said no. I don't want you to share it with me.
I paid money for this. Okay. But no, I spoke to. I said to him, yeah, I want you to share it, but here's what I want you to do. And this was a smart move, and I wasn't doing it to be. It turned out. I said, I don't want to do it. You do it with me in here. I want you to do it with the whole group of people as a team. Wow. I'm part of that group, and I want you to give the feedback for the everything, including what you want to talk about me. Wow. He was even surprised by that one. I have to say that he was surprised. He was a consultant from Smith College. Wow. Because so we did, and he brought up his criticisms about me, and basically it was something I alluded to before. I had kind of known. He basically said, Kevin, sometimes in meetings you're overpowering your staff. You're talking too much, and you're trying to get too many concepts across too quickly. And people are losing, but they're uncomfortable. They're not going to say that to you because you're in charge, that kind of thing. Wow. So, and it did surprise me because I always thought I was way more collegial and open than I apparently was in some things. But it was an eye opener again. Yeah. But I did appreciate it, and I think I ended up really being happy that I did it because, as we talk about it, I didn't have the terminology then. Right. I certainly made it clear that I was feeling vulnerable and I'd be exposed to it and live with it too. So I wanted everybody that was going to hear something that we got to do better, hear it the same way. Yeah. And ultimately it had a really positive effect. I didn't intend it to have a positive effect. It did. I intended I'm in it with the rest of them. I got to go deal with it. That kind of thing. Wow. It felt a little strange sitting in front of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine.
Yeah, but I think of Brene Brown's work with regards to just on vulnerability and connection happening in that space of vulnerability, and what a powerful moment that likely was. You're kind of allowing yourself to be so vulnerable in that space. Dr. Dre, I also go back and I wonder if the consultant wrote part of Kevin's Eli program. I think you should. Did he? Right. Was part of your Eli project? No, I'm teasing, but
yeah, no, it was really an interesting kind of it was a good experience. Yeah. It was.
Yeah, and we say Eli, for those who don't know, Executive Leadership Institute. Andre used to lead it, and we were all part of it at one point and on the board. But one of the things we had to do was a project, so that was what I was alluding to. Yeah. So great.
What he pointed out to me, I think he was trying to be nice by putting an intellectual concept on it, instead of saying I just talk too much. What he said, he goes, it's your learning style, Kevin. He goes, you're a talking learner.
There you go. I love it.
Actually, something out there that is like that. I would say, well, all right, good. So that's a little bit better. But that was something that was interesting to me. I had never heard that. He goes, you learn by talking.
Yeah, okay. But Kevin, I do appreciate you sharing that. I mean, because leaders have to be vulnerable as part of the emotional intelligence equation as well, right? That you put yourself in that spot to not only put yourself in front, but to show people, hey, we all have, blind spots, weaknesses, shortcomings, and it's okay, right? And we work on those as leaders, and I think that's powerful. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Kevin, I absolutely enjoyed that. And I was thinking about earlier when you mentioned about transparency. That was truly being transparent to allow the consultant to give that feedback in front of everyone. That was true transparency, boy. Man. Okay, we are coming up on another short break. And when we return, we'll go to our second audience question. So please stay tuned and we'll be right back on more of Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. All right, we are back with more on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors. For those of you joining us, I'm Dr. Loretta Howard, the co-host today with my other co-host, Dr. Cheryl White and Dr. Andre Howard, and our very special guest, Kevin Walsh. So we are going to go into our second audience question, and I'm going to ask Dr. Dre to answer first, then Dr. Cheryl and Kevin. So here's the question. How does a leader's emotional intelligence impact staff morale and organizational culture, especially during times of crisis or change? Gonna start with you, Dr. Dre.
Wow. The audience is really offering up some powerful questions. That's a good one. I think as I think about it, emotional intelligence again just doesn't, like influence staff morale and org culture during a crisis or during change. It essentially becomes the culture, if I could offer that up in those moments. Here's why. Because when things are stable, policies, procedures, everyone's checking off the boxes, that can carry an organization. But when a crisis happens or something hits or some change is imposed, people stop following the system, the processes. They begin to follow people. And specifically, they really follow the leader. What kinds of emotional signals is the leader demonstrating and displaying? And so we call it, to some degree, another term, um, emotional contagion, where leaders are mood setters, whether they intend to be or not. But staff is constantly trying to read the leader's face, the tone, their pace, their presence, their volume, their calibration. It's the sense of safety and trust, especially when you have a leader who's in control and can certainly lead through those times of crisis and change. So I think they follow the leader, and that's where emotional intelligence really becomes powerful. It really becomes the culture as part of that process.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with everything that Dr. Dre has said. And, one of the things, mantra that I will say around culture is that the culture becomes what's being modeled, supported, and rewarded.
Yeah.
Right. So, what is the leader saying and doing? What are they consciously or unconsciously teaching others to do? And what is being incentivized plays into that. And when I think of emotional intelligence, again, I'm thinking of self-awareness. So if I'm not aware, I may not be, um, um, I may not be showing up in a way that's most helpful. If I'm lacking empathy in the midst of a crisis or change, that's where we want to be empathetic. But if I'm lacking in my ability to demonstrate empathy for others, then again, I might miss something that's real important. So my emotional intelligence, again, goes to my self-awareness. It also goes to my ability to be empathetic. It goes to my ability to be culturally in tune, to be organizationally aware. It goes to my ability to engage appropriately and help people navigate conflict. In the midst of change, we're going to have people trying to figure out how to be together. Things are different. And so I think emotional intelligence is going to really be impactful on the morale and the organizational culture if that leader is lacking in self-awareness.
Excuse me. Yes, obviously, I would agree with everybody, both of you. The leader's demeanor, their affect, how they relate with everybody is going to be on. They're under the microscope at that point. As we were just saying, and people, emotional contagion can happen. So you have a responsibility to not just model it, though. You have to remember as you're modeling it, which is good. That might keep the temperature in the room down a bit. But I do think you have to try to, as a leader, you have a responsibility to try to find more organizational structure ways to try to manage it. And one of the things you probably don't have the answer for the issues that are causing all this unrest and easy. We're just in one of those things where we're under a lot of crisis. We're under a lot of things we don't understand. So we're kind of in a state of panic. It might feel like it's in a state of panic. But I think when they get some groups, you can have group meetings with your staff, acknowledge where everybody is, the level of everybody's feelings, And then when they talk about it, you can sometimes pick up the themes of what's really bothering them and what's the things that they feel they're missing, or what's the things that are really impacting them. And then I think what you can do is, I hope I can get this point clear, is then at least what you can do is you can then formulate the questions that they think they needed to get answered to make them feel better. You know what I mean? Like, then they think that you recognize what they're going through. And they're that makes it, that relieves people stress. It relieves the everyday stress of the I'll call it, for the want of a better word, the online worker, right? If the leader is taking that kind of an active role, he's demonstrating it by calmness, and you said, not adding fuel to the fire, but is also, it has to actively find a way to demonstrate that he recognizes it, that we're in this together. And I always felt that, it seemed, someone taught me this one. If you then get everybody together and you try to, like I said, get their feelings and understand what it is, and then kind of formulate the questions that would help relieve the stress that they're feeling, even though you don't have the answer to the questions, they at least begin to think that person gets it, and I have some confidence they're going to help figure it out. And personally, I think that's a really good approach to when you're in a situation like that. But you have to feel your emotional telescope. You have to feel vulnerable. You stand in front of everybody, tell them you don't know the answers to this, right? But we're going to work this out, and this is one of the ways on how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great answers. I agree with everything that you all said about the leader establishing the tone of what's going to happen and having that empathy, hearing what people have to say. So I absolutely agree with all you said. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cheryl for our next.
Okay, so Kevin, wondering, when someone you have led or coached is struggling, not with performance, but with how they're showing up relationally, what do you do first?
Well, I would set time aside to have a private conversation about this, because it'd be really important. I think it's important to find out if it's, what would be the right word, if it's a matter of their capacity. Do they know how to do it? Or is it related to their motivation? They don't think it's important, that it's an attitudinal kind of issue. I think when you would because you would address, you resolve it by understanding it better like that. Or at least you can address it by understanding it better that way. But that happens I think you have to have a conversation that is non-judgmental. You're trying to figure this out, and you're trying to discuss this with them. But and I hope this doesn't sound contradictory, you also have to make sure it's clear to them, there is an issue here. We got a problem. You know what I mean? We have to recognize that there's something that we have to work on. But I want to try to do it in a way that it's fact-finding and, I don't know, collegial, developing, I don't know, think something like that. It's not more like bringing them in with a checklist on, this is what you're doing wrong and you got to change it. It won't work.
Yeah, I love that, that I like just the vision of sitting side by side, and then providing them with that feedback, but also us listening and asking questions to discern, is it about skill or is it about will? So then we know how best to support. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, and continuing somewhat on that same line, Kevin, I mean, you've been doing leadership for decades. You've been coaching, connecting, guiding, giving direction, being patient, giving lectures when you had to, throughout your career. But have you ever had, for example, a high performer who was just so emotionally disconnected from their team? How did you navigate that particular leader? What kind of conversation took place? What were your actions as part of that process? Has that ever happened to you?
Well, yes, I think it happened. In this sense, I think this is an example that fits that, Andre. When I began working one of the places, the person that was in charge of all the clinicians, the clinical department, when I got there, he was a program manager. He was in charge. He was identified title as a program manager. But when he related to the rest of the management team on the administrative level, he just was a fish out of water. I mean, he couldn't do it. What would happen was he would start if people he didn't think were paying attention to him, he would literally start to get anxious. I mean, and you could hear it. You could hear it in his voice. He would literally almost try. He'd just give up and he'd shudder and he just like shut down to the point where actually when I got there, people were almost ridiculing him at times. It was a kind of a side joke about this man. But what I did realize when I was there, I knew who he was. This man was a gifted clinician and an expert on clinical services. He knew more about evidence-based program and trauma-informed care and all sorts of stuff. And I knew that we needed his input. We needed him to be part of that team. He knew way more about it than I did and more about it than anyone else I knew. So I did talk to him. I talked to him about it, and he acknowledged how it upsets him when people don't pay attention to him and everything. So, and then he asked me something which I thought was surprising. He asks me for a promotion.
Okay.
But what he did was this. He said, I'm a program director. He goes, I think I should be a director. And quite frankly, he was right. This was a significant department. He was, for some reason, I think it was related to how people viewed him.
Right.
So I said to him, I says, okay, I'll support you that way, Bill. I told him fine. But I says, yes. And I wanted to motivate him. So I told him, I said, by the way, I'll do it. I have the authority to reclassify it and promote you into the position. But I want to let you know something. This isn't a tryout. You're either, if you don't function well in the director level thing, you're going to have to leave. So, and that was, I guess what you could say, not such a subtle threat, but it was a motivator. And I really didn't want to scare him, but I didn't want him to think of it as some slot, just an easy thing to do. Long story short is, when that happened, and then I knew his value, and I put him in a position on the management team that people began to listen to him. And then once he wasn't get that, what I think he felt was like a negative feedback or dismissed, he really demonstrated his values. And then when we had meetings, I would always point out what a positive influence the clinical services is doing for the whole program, because, we're getting referrals. We're really managing kids that hadn't been able to. And this was the leader that did it. And he was, by the way, he was an invaluable member of the whole place. Invaluable. He was great, but he had to, he had to get through that anxiety and things like that. And it was so, and that took an ongoing process. I don't want to say nurture him to it, but there were times when we'd have to have, you got to get a little tougher, Bill, and move into. But he was good with understanding it, and we supported it. So,
well, Kevin, I'm so surprised. I thought you kicked him off the bus. I mean, you've got that zero tolerance policy sometimes in place. I'm surprised you didn't.
By that point, my career had developed emotional intelligence, and I learned to change. You see, that's what.
Gotcha.
Maybe 20 years earlier, I might have said it.
All right. Appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you.
Kevin, you have some of the greatest stories. You
Yes.
really do. You are so great at storytelling. And I think we learned so much from that, hearing from you. But we are at the top of a break again. So when we return, we're going to do something we call rapid fire, and Dr. Cheryl will take you through that. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, informing leaders and inspiring solutions. Welcome back to Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, inspiring solutions and informing leaders. I am having too much fun listening to Kevin today, so I hope our listening audience is enjoying this show
Yes,
as much as we
absolutely.
are.
Yes.
We are going to go into our rapid fire round, Kevin, so get ready for these one word, one sentence answers. All right, turning it over to you, Dr. Cheryl.
All right. So, Kevin, these are either or, head or heart. Which one gets you in trouble more?
My head.
Silence or confrontation? Which is harder for you as a leader?
Silence.
Feedback in the moment or feedback after you've cooled down?
This is hard. Feedback sometimes in the moment could put me under control.
Okay. And self-aware leader with average skills or highly skilled leader with zero self-awareness?
No, self-aware leader with average.
Right. How about this one for Jake? Fill in the blank here, Kevin. Real short and sweet. The emotion I had to learn to lead through was blank.
Anxiety
Okay.
and the fear of failure.
Okay. Most leaders don't realize how much their blank affects everyone in the room.
Their attitude.
Okay. And last one, the moment I knew I had grown as a leader was when blank.
I retired. No,
Great answer. Thank you.
I did it. I did it.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, we're going to go into what we like to call our quick hit one word or one sentence. So here you go. One word that describes your leadership style today.
For me, collegial.
Okay. One word that described your leadership style 10 years ago.
You're right. This time frame is more my retirement. So, but previous to that, I would say I was much more directive and authoritative.
Okay. The emotion leaders are most afraid to show in the workplace.
Their uncertainty and their anxiety.
Thank you. Dr. Dre, no, Dr. Cheryl, I'm sorry.
Okay, either one. Hey, so I'm
Yeah.
wondering, personal or unexpected, what song plays in your head when you need to reset as a leader?
No one will heard it. There's a song, Will You Go, Lassie Go? It's an Irish song. It's a beautiful song. And I don't, I could explain, let me explain a minute. It reminds, it's about Ireland and how beautiful Ireland is with all the wildflowers and things like that. And one of the highlights of my life was the first time I visited Ireland with my mother, so she could bring me where she lived. And we walked the Derry Road, she called it. And she always told me she kept on wanting to go back to Ireland to smell the wildflower. And so
Beautiful.
that's in that song. And I honestly, I heard the song. So when I'm in the car, I just love the song. It's on my Spotify thing. I probably play it a couple of times a day when I'm thinking. So I love the song. It's a great song.
Wonderful. And who in your life, not a book, not a course, taught you the most about emotional intelligence?
This is hard. That's a hard one. I don't, maybe my mother again. I mean, because even when I was young, I always remember, we lived in a world where, and again, I want to explain it as, it was a traditional blue collar neighborhood, Irish Catholic immigrants, and everybody worked hard, and we didn't function too far out of our close knit people that came from Ireland, right? We were in our own world, but it was my mother who taught me about tolerance. And when there was other ethnic groups and stuff like that, who a lot of people didn't talk positively about it. My mother always talked about trying to understand that, and you shouldn't say things. She obviously couldn't understand the world, and she said this to me. She couldn't understand one of our neighbors who was a Lutheran. She couldn't understand how the Catholic Church was teaching us he couldn't go to heaven, that we have to learn to be open to this kind of thing. Now, but I never forgot the fact that she would stop and think about things like that. She was probably the person who did it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate it.
So did Kevin pass the rapid fire test? I think he did pretty good.
Yes, he did. He did.
No, he did not. Those were sentences and stories, even in the midst of rapid fire.
Wanted him to sing the song.
And that's all good. That's all good. Yeah.
I wanted him to sing the
Yes,
song.
a tribute to his mother. I love it.
Absolutely.
So, okay, Dr. Dre, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're coming to an end here. Yeah, I know we're coming to an end here. So, changing direction, Kevin, we asking all of our guests to kind of share their response to the following question. If you could give your younger self one piece of leadership advice, what would that advice be?
To recognize the fact that you don't have to have the answers for everything. You can be uncertain. Recognize that it's not a fault, it's not a mistake. It's like I said before, it's a knowledge gap. And yeah, that would be one of the things that would be my piece of advice, to recognize that. Yeah, I think just recognizing that not understanding everything, that you have the responsibility to lead a team. You don't have the responsibility to solve every problem.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
Individual, I should say.
Yeah, I like that. And it takes a certain level of emotional intelligence to understand that too, right? Because that's a real deep perspective. So thank you, Kevin.
All right. So, Kevin, what final thoughts or tips would you like to share with our listening audience? And if our listeners wanted to contact you, how could they contact you?
Well, my final tip would be like this. My final tip about emotional intelligence, they should ask themselves is, do they really understand it, or they think they understand it? And to take the time to actually go out and learn what the are and the behavioral strategies you can use to learn it, because you'll learn that it's the strategic value in your leadership thing. And I promise you'll be so glad you took the time to learn it right and practice it. Yeah, that would be my tip to the. What was the final?
Is there some way our listeners could contact you if they wanted to reach out to you?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I have my email address. I'm on LinkedIn. And my email address is kcwalsh9702@gmail.com.
Thank you so much.
And I would just comment too, the email is shorter than some of his other stories. So that's an accomplishment, Kevin. So I appreciate that email address. Love it.
Anyone
and Kevin knows I can poke fun at him too. So
oh, sure. And if anybody wants to listen, if anybody's feeling like they think they might want to contact me, email me, think about this. You've realized how much I like to talk. So I'd value hearing from anybody that wants to talk something.
Absolutely.
Be great.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Kevin.
This has really been great, Kevin, for you to be back with Dr. Cheryl and Dr. Dre, just the three of you getting together again. It was like home week almost.
It does feel good. It feels good. I miss it. I definitely miss that.
It was good. So we're going to have to do it more often. Kevin, we thank you for joining us today. And we thank our listening audience for tuning in. So we invite you to continue to send those questions and your topics that you're interested in learning about to Leadership Matters Questions, all is one word, at innovisions.org. That's INNOVISIONS.org. And please join us every Wednesday on YouTube at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, or download our podcast at your convenience on demand at Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or Spotify. Until the next time on Leadership Matters with the People's Doctors, where we are informing leaders, inspiring solutions, and remember, leadership isn't a title, it's an action. So stay curious, stay inspired, and lead boldly.